So we're here talking about your film, The Heirloom. But before we jump into that, I want to start with an icebreaker question. In the film, your characters adopt a dog. But resources aside, assuming that they can have all the food that they need and all the environment and everything they need for a healthy life, what animal would you adopt?
Monkey.
A monkey.
Monkey. I've wanted a monkey since I was a baby.
Really?
Yeah.
What appeals to you about a monkey? This is a very interesting answer.
Their wiliness, their nimbleness, the way they can swing through trees and through the sky, and probably, yeah, they're the closest I can imagine to a freer version of myself.
That's funny. Well, maybe your next film.
Maybe.
About a monkey. Yeah?
Hey, please, God, yes.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
So The Heirloom, let's talk about it. For those who are just discovering the film, can you give a synopsis on what The Heirloom is about?
The Heirloom is a film that I made with my wife, Grace Glowicki, about our experience adopting a traumatized rescue dog, and the way that her arrival in our lives unleashed a torrent of psychological demons and angels in my own mind, and pushed our relationship to a breaking point of either commitment or collapse. And it's also about my character, who in the film is a control freak filmmaker, and his attempt to make a movie about adopting this dog. So it's kind of a metafictional movie about the experience making a movie about my wife and I adopting this dog.
That's incredible. I had wondered when I was watching it how much of this film is autobiographical. So like big portions of it, this is something that's very, very personal to you?
Very personal to me, and very autobiographical. It's kind of like it's emotionally autobiographical. Some of the details are extrapolated or expanded upon or pulled back from for the sake of the film, but emotionally speaking, it's absolutely autobiographical. And not to underplay it, literally speaking, in a lot of the movie, it's beat for beat from our lives.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I think about with filmmaking is, write what you know. And so it seems like this is something that was very personal, and I think it came across that way.
And there's a scene near the beginning of the movie where the two characters are bickering with one another about whether to get a dog. Have you seen it?
I have seen it, yes.
Yeah, and that scene is like a beat for beat recreation of a labyrinthine bicker that we had been having for months leading up to shooting the movie.
This is really funny. I mean, watching the film, people who are in long-term relationships can maybe see some of themselves in these characters, because I know me and my husband went through the discussion about getting a dog. This was years ago now, but we went through that discussion and the pros and cons, and we ended up getting a dog.
Yes.
Yes. We now have 3 of them, so
nice.
it's escalated from there.
We've stopped at 1, mercifully.
That's probably a good idea. We love our three critters, yeah, those discussions were very important for making that a stable situation.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I think that's what really I connected with so much in the film, is just how real it was, like how much I could see like me and my husband's relationship in the relationship that's on screen. Talk about adapting that. Talk about putting that on screen and making it feel authentic.
Yeah, we really. I felt at a certain point early in the process there wasn't a screenplay. We had kind of a 25-page treatment that was just the beats that I knew were going to be in the film, but we didn't have a proper script. And I felt as though I couldn't deviate from what had actually happened to us without losing the compass of intuition and inspiration that had led me to the project in the first place. So I was always just trying to look into what had happened to us really and truly, and not to forget that and try to stay close to the texture of that. And thankfully, I didn't have to translate these experiences to actors. It was me and my wife, so we were able to reenact. It was kind of like a therapeutic reenactment role play type situation, this movie. And we were always just trying to look back at what the dysfunction was that we had in that conversation, or what the wrong turns we were taking here, or what that key thing one of us had said to one another that had hurt or moved or inspired the other one. And we did a lot of improvising in the film. And so, yeah, we were always kind of doing improvised reenactments of what had happened to us.
Well, it's so interesting because this is a very small production. It's just you
Yes.
two and Millie, the dog.
A few momentary cameos.
A few momentary cameos. That is true. But yeah, it's a very small production, relatively speaking, and so I imagine that allowed you guys to be a little more nimble with how you approached the production and how you told the story.
It did, for sure. Yeah, I went into this film not having everything figured out. I had instincts, but I knew that there was a lot that I didn't understand about how things were going to unfold going into principal photography. And that was okay, because we knew that and planned the production model around that. So we just rented an apartment for a couple of months, furnished it with all of the furnishings from Grace and I's actual apartment, and made kind of a bizarro version of our home. And then that was really the only logistical need for the movie. And there weren't a bunch of moving pieces that required us to understand how exactly the whole contraption of the shoot was going to work. We knew that we could show up to the Playhouse with the crew, and if I realized, oh, the scene has to be this, or oh, the scene has to be that, or oh, the scene needs to be a little bit different this way, we weren't short of any of the elements that we needed. We just needed the home and the actors and the team, and that gave us the flexibility to improvise as much as we did.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
There are some really fun sequences in the film. It looked like a fun movie to make. Yeah, talk about some of those funner things. Maybe your improv. I'm not sure. I mean, they're just really fun to watch. Talk about,
Which ones come to mind?
Well, there was the scene where you guys are playing out the scene, and Grace is on the. She's like, acting and on the floor and just kind of very So there's things like that, and then there's the multiple takes with Millie. There's a few times where it's like, this looks like it was fun to make.
It was fun at times.
Yeah.
It was fun at times, and it scraped the bottom of the psychological barrel at other times.
Interesting.
That particular scene that you're referencing was, so in the film, my character attempts to make a film about adopting a dog, and what I found in post-production and editing was that whenever I was intentionally performing a filmmaker trying and floundering to make a movie about the experience intentionally, I was overdoing it. I was kind of making it shticky. I was hamming it up in a certain way. And we ended up not using any of that footage. And that scene that you're referring to is actually a real attempt to shoot a scene that didn't have to do with the meta movie-making plot. It had to do with one of the base plot points. But I was so off the path creatively when we were shooting that I got to the editing room and it felt like this footage is completely ridiculous and way too wild and wacky for this movie. But then watching it, I saw all of these moments between takes where I was directing Grace in this way that I could see from the vantage point of the editing room was really bad direction, not helping, way too silly, and that was actually much better footage to use for the scenes trying to portray me attempting to make the movie. It was actually the stuff where I was trying to make the movie without having any intention of using that footage, so my guard was completely down, and I was behaving in really the cringiest way possible because I didn't realize that anyone was going to be seeing that material. So that particular scene was at the very end of the shoot, and I'm glad that it looks like it was fun to shoot. It was hell to shoot. My brain was completely out of any lubricant. I was terrified. It was at the end of the shoot. I was terrified that the movie was going to be a disaster. And really, I think why that scene looks so kind of big and fun is that I was so worried that the small relationship drama that we had been making was going to be boring, that I was trying to pump it up with gags and zippy, fun jokes, huge physical comedy. And it didn't make sense for the base level movie, but it ended up making sense for the metafictional level movie.
How incredible that you could repurpose footage in that way, specifically because that's just the nature of this film. I mean, I would have never guessed that that was like, you know, essentially outtakes or, you know, cutting room floor material. It just fits the narrative so well.
I'm so glad.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
That's so cool. So there's a dog in the film. That's Millie.
Millie.
Talk about working with Millie and having a dog a part of a production.
Millie was, sorry.
Yeah, you're okay.
Millie was wonderful to work with. When we started out making this film, when I got the idea to do this, I felt horrified by the idea of hiring an actor dog, because the whole inspiration came really from one image to me, which was our actual dog that we had recently adopted, and was very fearful of us and of all things, trembling in the corner with such visible anxiety. And something about her trembling really moved me, and I felt as though I was seeing physically manifested the feelings that were inside of me of anxiety that I'm able to encrypt and encode in ways that don't manifest so visibly as trembling. Instead, I encrypt them into all sorts of neurotic behavior. And seeing her trembling, it was just so shockingly honest to me, and vulnerable. And I really wanted to show people the tenderness of our little creature. And I was horrified by the idea of bastardizing that and hiring some Airbud dog that was going to be trying to, you know, do one fearful beat on command, but would be totally hallmarked and lack any of the authenticity of a real rescue dog experience. And I really felt that it was probable that we would go through the process of casting for the dog, never find one that would work, and simply not make the movie, because it would have killed me to bastardize the portrayal of our dog. But thankfully, my producer, Justin Elchakia, he found this woman, Helen Ferguson, who doesn't actually work in film traditionally. She trains dogs for agility competitions.
Oh, yeah.
And she had this one whippet named Cheers, who, by the nature of her breed, looks emaciated. And when she gets excited, she trembles, and she naturally holds her tail between her legs. Just kind of the nature of the type of animal that she is. And she had this alien look to me that spoke to the experience I had had of this dog coming from the Dominican Republic, kind of like falling from the sky into our lives. Cheers had this look to me of this creature from some other place that also looked very vulnerable, and as though she had come from kind of a haunted past. And thankfully, she was the most confident, calm dog I have ever met in my life. Super easy to work with. The process of working with her was really just trying to let her be, trying to intervene as little as possible. Our Helen, who was absolutely fantastic to work with at the beginning, was trying to coax the dog to do particular things, and it wasn't working. It was looking like the nightmare that I had foreseen every day of pre-production. But eventually we just asked for that to stop, and oftentimes Helen would actually leave the room and we would just be there with the dog. And dog's behavior doesn't lie. It's truthful 100% of the time unless you're trying to coerce it to do something. So we just tried to create an environment where we could be with the dog, live with the dog, and allow those natural canine behaviors that have entranced humans for thousands of years to live. And to live naturally.
Well, I'm so happy that it came off as natural as you were hoping it would, and it certainly feels like an authentic performance from a dog, and of course from you guys as well. This is I was mentioning how like I could see like my own relationship and the relationship you put on screen. I wondered if you had an intended audience for this film. I mean, I know we want as many people to see it as possible. It's a really good film and really entertaining. But yeah, did you go into this film with an idea of who you wanted this film specifically to speak to?
It's a good question. I didn't have a demographic in mind exactly. I think that I was really... I like to usually be more prepared for a film project. In this case, we were going in on pure instinct. And I think the only audience that I could really use to assess the movie and how it was going was myself. I didn't have the distance to the project to be able to assess it in a more objective way. So I was just always trying to hit that nerve in myself and trusting that if I hit it in myself, it would hit it for others. But probably couples, long-term couples of our generation. I think there's a lot of couples or single people as well in our generation who are teetering on the question of whether to go ahead and start a family with somebody or commit to somebody, or whether that's just not the lifestyle that suits the modern era anymore. And I think couples solidarity was guiding us to an extent as well.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the conversation closer towards the end where the question does come up, what are you going to prioritize? Oh man, that was a very, again, just kind of projecting my own, lived experience. I mean, me and my husband never really reached that point, but man, if our relationship at any point ever reached that, like that was such an organic and authentic conversation and is terrifying, right? Like you can feel the struggle, I guess, in like, because I think about that all the time with like what I do, and what is family going to look like going forward? How am I going to balance work and life and my sanity and try to keep everything? So it was very interesting to hear those conversations come through, and again to like place those in like my life and like how would I feel there? And it was so good at getting those emotions across.
Thank you.
So
yeah, that scene when we were shooting that, a funny thing happened, Thomas, where halfway through the shooting of the film, when my character starts making the film about it, at that point, the movie process, the shooting process had caught up to where we were at in our actual lives. And we were no longer reenacting things that had happened retrospectively. We were now filming things as they happened to us and trying to take the emotional experience of how this movie was cannibalizing our lives and cannibalizing our relationship and starting to threaten it and fold those back into the movie. And so by the time we got to that almost final scene where we're teetering on the precipice of being destroyed by this film, it was difficult to distinguish what was fiction dramatized and what was a conversation between me and Grace at that time. That scene was one of the only ones that was kind of written, but it was written the morning of, from the feelings that I could feel Grace and I were steeped in, of being on the edge,
Wow.
So I remember leaning back, listening to Grace give her monologue in that scene, and it was my, at the time, girlfriend basically laying down a kind of ultimatum. And it was dramatized. It was within a safe bounding box of performance, but it was touching a very real nerve for both of us. We were there.
So fascinating. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, like, because the thing that comes up is, I don't want to be a movie, is what she says. Obviously, filming has its setbacks, its holdups. There's so many factors that go into filmmaking that could prevent a film from happening. Was the relationship ever one of those things that almost made this movie not happen?
The relationship, it's funny because it never would have happened in the first place without the relationship. The relationship was the central drive in so many ways, in that, of course, we were drawing from our relationship, but also I only knew that we could go into this film shoot without a screenplay because I had so much trust in Grace and in our relationship, having performed in stuff together before. Grace made a feature called Tito that she directed, that was just the two of us acting in. I made a short film several years ago called Her Friend Adam that's just the two of us acting in. And so I had a lot of confidence that together we would be able to go into a room, and just knowing the commitment that we have together to performance and to filmmaking, that with Grace, I knew we could show up and crack the scene. So without the relationship, the whole thing would have been off the table. But at a certain point, the film and the relationship were definitely threatening the existence of one another. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy that you were able to get through that, and that you have a film that is, hopefully something a lot of people can connect with and relate with, and find maybe some solace in, and that's awesome. And it's playing here in Vancouver.
Yes.
So tell me about how you feel about the film being at the Vancouver International Film Festival.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here at VIFF. I've never been before, and this is the Canadian premiere of the movie. Which is really important to me. It's played elsewhere. We premiered the film at International Film Festival Rotterdam in the Netherlands. It's played at a few places in Europe. But coming home to Canada has a special place to me. I have so many Canadian filmmakers who I love and respect, who are also showing their films at this festival, and to be able to share the project with them and with the general audience as well means a lot to me.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations. This is so exciting, and I'm happy that you're here and that more people are going to be able to see it here in Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Thomas.